You don't know you're poor until others tell you. Who told you?
My mother tells me beautiful stories about Kibra. Kibra had cows and goats and farmland.
The Nubis came to Kenya to do what?
The Nubi tribe were considered a warrior tribe during both World War I and World War II.
Prepare to die. Your father's early death, how has that led to that being one of the mantras that you live your life by?
He was 54 years when he passed away. I was 18. Something has been ripped off from you. The manly, fatherly presence.
Gamaliel Hassan is a strategic mind with credentials most people only dream of. But today's story isn't about titles or degrees. It's about a boy from Kibra and a mentor who showed up just at the right time. Ben Muchemi.
A gentleman who did not know me. He was much older, so I treated him like I treat my own dad. For a lot of wisdom, a lot of parting of knowledge. He just saw a person who was able to do something.
Yeah.
And he believed in me. But his story is also remarkable. They discovered he had cancer and they gave him a 6% chance of surviving the surgery. But he said, as long as there's hope, imagine this, he lived for another 5 years.
And your mom?
My mother, Fatma Abeid Anyanzo, she formed Kenya Anti-Rape Organization to create awareness around rape. Violence against women was very high back in the 80s.
If you knew you only had one more day to live, what would you do differently today? Our guest has faced versions of that question more than once, and the answers he found and continues to find changed everything. Hassan, karibu sana to the Nitpicker podcast.
Asante sana, Carol. Thank you for having me.
Hassan, you've got a very interesting background, and one of the things that you've told me is that you don't know you're poor until others tell you. Who told you that you were poor?
That's an interesting story that I have. When you're growing up in a neighborhood where everyone is like you, they're having the same struggle like you, then I think that communal factor makes you're all even, you're all equal. So there's no one who's better off or worse off. And I think from that narrative and growing up in Kibra, I never knew we were poor. I never knew. It never hit me as a young kid that we were poor as a family until the day that we decided. I remember it was one Eid because we loved celebrating Eid a lot. And the way the setup is in Kibra is that during Eid, you visit everyone. So all the Muslim neighbors, all the Nubi neighbors, the kids would just walk around in a grouping of either 3, 4, 5 kids together and knock on any door that has a Nubi living in it. And the doors were always opened. And I mean, it was nice. You walk in, you get mkatikuta, some small, very tiny kind of breads, very delicious. You're given food, you're given drinks, and you're given money as well. That was interesting. So that was Eid for us. So you walk around and by the time you come back home, you have quite a bunch of coins because in every house you go to, there'll be a coin given to you. And obviously when you got that kind of money, sometimes you'd say, let's go spend some of it before we take the rest home. And I do recall
now you and your squad.
Me and my squad.
Yeah.
So we said, we're dressed up. You can imagine it's our, call it Sunday best, the best clothing that you ever had, and you're feeling all nice and you're siku mzima. So you walk all the way to Yaya Centre, and we get frozen at the door. And you're wondering why. You're seeing other kids going in, other people going in, but
was this your first time to go to Yaya?
It was my first time. We heard of Yaya. Yaya Centre was a big deal back then. I think for us, it was the first mall that we knew of. So we were pretty much excited. And we had some chums on the pocket,
course,
right?
Yeah. You're loaded.
You're loaded.
Yes.
So we reached there and to get frozen by the guard. And he says, you can't go in. And we say, no, we want to go in. We want to see. Okay, probably you want to shop. I don't know if you could afford anything inside there.
But you didn't know.
But we didn't know,
afford,
right?
Yeah.
So he was very adamant, extremely adamant. And I think from that conversation, what came about was that, how can you guys come inside here? Look at you. Look at you. And I think at that moment is when I looked at me And I look at the people around me, and then I realized there's a difference between us and every other person who was walking in. So the reason why we were frozen is simply we were poor. We looked poor in our parts. The way we were dressed, we were not dressed appropriately, so to speak. And we couldn't get into Yaya. But being the naughty boys we were, and there were many entrances, trust you me, we entered. We did. We did. At least for a few minutes before we got busted and got thrown out.
So that didn't kill your spirit?
No, it didn't kill our spirit. I mean, we had walked all the way from Kibra to Yaya Centre. So we got a panya route somewhere, walked in. We didn't last more than 6 or 7 minutes inside there.
Before you were smoked again? By who? Another guard?
By another guard. So that reinforced the very first thought that, you don't belong. And that was really hammered on us. So when I went back home to my mother and I told her that story, I mean, she was pretty much upset around it. But she kept on telling me that, that should never define you and you belong. And even as I grew up and become a much more older person, got my first job, she kept on telling us that if you have an extra coin with you, specifically she used to mention, go to Hilton Hotel. And to do what? Just to have a cup of tea. That's it. So save, even if it's 3 months, 4 months, 5 months of saving. But just go there and have a cup of tea or drink juice, whatever it is, for one simple reason, because you belong. So to reinforce the thought that you belong. And at that time, you're very young, but you're still also feeling a bit shy about going into these so-called exclusive places. My mom would always insist, go, sit there, go to, there's a hotel, Grand Regency. Go and just sit and drink a cup of, they'll serve you. And she used to insist, they will serve you. So I grew with that mentality that, yes, I belong everywhere. Albeit that first lesson in life, that there was indeed a difference. There's a class difference that I never knew was there.
Had she been through this for her to decide she's going to punch above her weight? I mean,
Yes,
what went through, by the time she's imparting that in her kids, it's a lesson that she has learned herself.
So my mother was studied as a secretary. And she was lucky enough to have worked at Serena Hotel, much later in life. And therefore she had seen that exposure. So like a receptionist, she had been there, she had gone through that, and she could see that class distinction. And I think in her own way, she was just trying to tell me, you belong. You need to think over and above where people are saying you really are. But also importantly, if you speak to her, she tells you a very interesting story. Her story is that her father was an Islamic scholar, and her dad really went out of his way to educate the kids. And remember, I'm speaking about is the 40s and the 50s, going to the 60s. So my grandfather, on my mother's side, really emphasized on her that she was as good as any other person. She was as good as a man, as good as a boy.
Wow.
So that was always re-emphasized on her. And she keeps on saying that's the reason why she managed to do all that she did. Because the father was an Islamic scholar, schooled them, yes, but also wanted the daughters to be more and to have more. And you're talking about 50s and 60s of this world. And interestingly, my mother was the first student at Moi Girls High School. If you go there and look for student registered number 001.
How do you have your mother's registration number, Hassan?
Yeah, go there and check.
Which one? The one in Nairobi?
Yes,
the one in Woodley?
That we call Kibra. That's still Kibra, but it's just
and we'll talk about that. Seriously?
Yes. So she's very proud of that, extremely so.
Yeah.
And she's been an alumni of the school for a long time as well. So coming from the backdrop that she was amongst the first few girls in her community to go to school and to finish high school. So that was a big deal. When during those eras, then girls would marry off at 12, 13, 14 years of age. And here it is that she also gave birth to us. So in a way, she was parting the same knowledge that her dad gave, the sense of self-belief. So when I'd come with stories like that, my mother would always brush them off and say, leave them alone. You belong. You belong, and no one can chase you away from anything. Just keep your mind open and it can be done.
Now, your mom's generations have been in Kibra, because you keep saying it's not Kibera, it's Kibra.
Oh, I keep on saying Kibra.
Yeah, which is the right, I guess is the right, it's the right one.
It is Kibra.
And not many people know the name Kibra is a Nubian word.
Yes.
And your mother is of Nubian extraction.
Yes.
Your father's from Western Kenya.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about your mother's growing up and you growing up as part Nubian and that community in Kibra that have been there for over a century, isn't it?
Over a century. So I was very, very lucky to have seen my great-grandmother and lived with my great-grandmother. I never saw my grandmom from my mom's side. She passed away when she was, I think, 30-something years, very young. So I never got to see my grandma.
So she passed away when she'd already given birth to your mother?
To my mother, yes. So my grandmother passed away before my great-grandmother.
Yeah.
So I never got to see my grandma. I just have pictures our family have good genes. I'll tell you that.
If you must say so.
I do insist. So I was lucky because I was able to be given stories, of our history as a Nubian community, where we came from and how we arrived in Kibra. And correctly I stated, Kibra is a Nubi word that means jungle. Because Kibra was a jungle. The Kibera we know right now is not the Kibera. My mother tells me beautiful stories about Kibera. Kibera had cows and goats and farmland. It was literally your typical village life. That's what Kibera was.
Because it was an extension, I guess, of Ngong Forest.
Yes.
So all of that has been wiped out.
And not just that. Ngong Forest went all the way, from the stories I was told, all the way to Kenyatta Hospital. In fact, at Kenyatta Hospital, there was a military camp. And that was the camp that the Nubis were living in. Now, where environment of Kenyatta, MTC, all of that.
And the Nubis came to Kenya to do what?
So the Nubis were part of the King's Army Rifle. During the colonial era, the Nubi tribe were considered a warrior tribe, tall, masculine, strong people who are now incorporated.
South Sudan?
From Sudan.
Okay.
South Sudan, mid-Sudan. It's a combination.
Actually, from Sudan at the time.
To Sudan at that time, right. So they were part and parcel of the King's Army Rifle. And anywhere the then British Army went, then of course the Nubis were part and parcel.
Were they going to fight, or were they there to carry their guns? What was their role?
They were the army. They were the army of the so call it the kingdom, the British Empire.
The British colony,
right.
yeah.
Yes.
So they're the ones who will be sent now to the front lines.
To the front line.
To shoot.
On behalf, of course, of the British Empire.
Which is why you've brought this very interesting box over here. What's this?
You should see right on top here. It's can you see the year?
We'll show it. Just tilt it.
I can tilt it like that.
Yeah.
You can see that?
TG Company, 1940.
1940.
So Second World War.
Yes, Second World War.
What was this used for?
This is 60 plus 25. This is 85 years old. This is my most precious material gift in the world. This box right here. It was a box that was handed over from my grandmother from my great-grandmother to my mother. And it's a memory that she has of the Second World War.
Yeah.
Like I've mentioned, our family was completely into the war as part of the King's Army Rifle. And what you're seeing here is an ammunition box.
So this used to carry bullets?
Bullets, guns, pistols,
and
ammunition,
so
dynamite.
So who was carrying this? Your great-granddad?
Yes. So this one, the story behind this particular box is cast in mystery, because this is 1940.
Yeah.
But my granddad fought in 1914 to 1918 war.
Your great-grandfather?
My great-grandfather.
Yes.
1940.
In the First World War.
And he never came back. So he is amongst those who were killed in action. And of course, there's a story again behind this. And again, listening to my great-grandmother, who was now the daughter of who we are speaking about, she kept on saying that when the war was winding down in 1918, they would walk all the way from the current Kibra, Soweto where it is. It was dense jungle, all the way to Kenyatta Hospital, where the military camp was. What had happened was, as the wars were winding down, people were returning back home, but he didn't come home. And then what happened is that the families that were staying there were then asked to leave the camp, and they were now allocated the current Kibra.
Oh, they were asked to leave the military camp?
Because the soldiers are not longer
That's
there.
right.
So, I mean, why are you still in the military camp?
Because your military person has died
is missing in action. We don't know where they are. So her story is a sad one, because she says as a daughter, she used to walk all the way up from Kibra to Kenyatta Hospital almost every other day, waiting for the dad to come. But the dad never came back. So he got lost in war, killed in action. To date, I see my mother still goes to the memorial. There's a memorial grave. I don't know if you're aware of that. You have a massive, big memorial grave.
Of the Nubian soldiers?
Of the World War I soldiers.
Is that the one that's at Ngong Race Course?
Yeah, that's
war cemetery. Yes.
That's for all the indigenous tribes that participated in the war.
So it's not just British soldiers laid to rest there?
African soldiers as well.
I see.
Yes. So my mother every year
there's a memorial,
and she'll go there without fail with a wreath in remembrance of her
grandfather.
Who never came back. Her great grandfather. Yes.
So at some point when he came back, he left.
No, he never came back. That's the end of that story.
Oh, that's the end of that story.
So
okay.
This one is an interesting one. I never really got to know how then my grandmother, my great grandmother, picked this one. So maybe a story for another day. And I asked my mother, and my mother says,
for another day for your great grandmother. That's a bigger story. Yeah. You're like, oh, Shosh. What do you call her, by the way?
Abuba.
Is that
that's a Nubian name for grandmother. Abuba.
So like Abuba, tell us how this to roll.
Yeah. So we've never really gotten to know, but she never could tell us. Anytime she'd talk about it, she'd cry a lot around it. So I mean, we let it be. But this was her most precious material wealth as well, which I was lucky that I was given to me.
Yeah,
I've had it for almost I'd probably say 20 years. I've had this, but it's been a family, call it a heirloom.
It's a family heirloom.
85 years or so. Yeah. And I mean, I put my tools inside it now. It's a heirloom, but it works.
Yes, but it's solid. It's a solid
1940. So very proud, and it always reminds me where we came from, reminds us of our history, reminds us of the sacrifices that we in Africa made during both World War I and World War II. Another interesting story, you've seen the 3 statues along
Kenyatta corner of Kenyatta and Kimathi Street.
You know, one of the statues is a Nubian, right?
No.
The one that has a funny looking hat.
Yes, the like tall hat. Yes.
Yeah. So Nubia still put on those hats. Then they have like a bow right on top.
Yes.
So as kids, we always encouraged, anytime we had time, just go there and take pictures and just remember where you're coming from. You're proud, very proud heritage of being a Nubian.
So you're 4th generation, and what I'm hearing you say is there's pretty much the entire Nubian community in Nairobi, because you're based here in Nairobi, has a military background.
Yes, because we all come, I would honestly say this, that probably all Nubis are related. We come from same clan. All of us who came to Kenya are related. When you go back generations, there'll always be somewhere that there's a dot joining together. So we are all one, all related.
Is it a united? Sorry, go ahead.
And Nubis are not just in Kibra. They're in Kibra, they're in Eldamaraville, Kisumu, communities, very large communities in Kisumu and Eldoradine. So they're also there. Quite.
Has the purity of the community been maintained, or have there now been so many intermarriages? So, for example, it's your mom who married outside the community. Is that very common?
Strangely, and I normally say this, that most of the time, if you marry, then you sort of take, not sort of, it is expected in an African custom, then you take the side of your dad.
Yeah.
So like me, people just say, no, you're Luya. That's it. No discussions. But with Nubis is kind of interesting. I don't know why, but I see that Nubis have such a strong cultural heritage that if you're to marry into a Nubi community, probably your children would be considered more of Nubi than even the father side. That's what I say. And I think it's because of the minority complexities around it. So if you're a minority, then you're sort of more bonded, more together than if you're a majority.
Right.
So I tend to think that Nubis over the years have always tried to ensure that their identity is not wiped out. So there have been a lot of intermarriages in the Nubi. Of course, they're pure Nubis from bloodline, but over the years, especially in the 30s and 40s, intermarriages between Maasai and then the Kikuyu community that came in. So quite a lot of intermarriages back then, but that did not wipe out the Nubi identity. I'm sure if somebody was to do a DNA test on us, I don't think it's a good idea to do a DNA test on anyone, but if you were to do, then you'd probably be very surprised where you're actually coming from. But in terms of their identity, Nubians are very passionate in terms of who they are, their identity, and also not forgetting that for a very long time, they're not just a minority community, but they're also a marginalized community. So there's a discussion when we gained independence and everybody was seen as a Kenyan, so to speak. The Nubi communities were left out. And even later on, when we had other communities being recognized, Nubians were not recognized. So there was a lot of discrimination on that.
In fact, there was a time you didn't have IDs. Has that been changed now?
So the issue of IDs is complicated. I'll say it is two times. One, as a Nubi, it was hard getting an ID, but I'd say I had luxury. I had luxuries that the Nubis did have because of the identity of my father.
Yes.
You know, the things that you call it majority, what's the word I'm looking for? It's more of the goodness of being in the majority. What do you call if you're white and you have higher privilege? White privilege, That's what I'm looking for. I wanted to say majority privilege. That's the word I'm looking for. So I was lucky enough to have also a majority privilege by virtue that my dad came from a majority tribe. But having said that, the fact that you're named Hassan was also a problem in Kenya in the 80s and the 90s. By the time I was getting my ID in 1997, 1998, it was problematic. I can freely tell you, up to today, Carol, if you have a Muslim name and you work to get a certificate of good conduct, your process is very different. That has always been the case. They take you for something called a vetting, whereby they vet you more.
And this is before Westgate,
this is
before all
Westgate,
of that, all the terrorist attacks.
It's from the shift at time until today. So there's always been a sort of marginalization, first and foremost, of the fact that you have a Muslim name, which is strange because you and I know that majority of those attacks are not necessarily perpetrated by somebody called Hassan or Mohammed,
Exactly.
But it was an old school way of trying to so-called vet a whole community with the hope that you can get one or two there. So that is the first problem. But the second one now was being a Nubi. And being a Nubi, and at that time, remember the back of your ID, you needed to state where you're coming from. A Nubi would state, my sub-location is where?
Kibra.
Yeah, my location, my ward is Kibra. So I think taking into account, again, I'm talking about 40 years, 30 years ago, it's taken us quite a long journey for the Nubi community to be appreciated as being part and parcel of Kenya. However, having said all that, and you bring in a bit of politics in it, and because the Nubis were the majority in Kibra for a long time, And of course, that was dangled quite a lot. Of course, they had ideas. It's not that they didn't have ideas. You have an idea, it's a process to get the idea. It's a bit more difficult. But during voting time, you know what? We'll make sure we recognize you. Therefore, vote this way or that way. However, come 2010, during the promulgation of the new constitution, all of that has changed in a large way. Because number one, the constitution is very clear that you cannot segregate, discriminate any person in terms of their language, their religion, or their tribe in Kenya. So that by virtue, the Nubis do not need to ask anyone whether they're Kenyans or not. They're Kenyans as far as the constitution is concerned. So there's no more asking of favors and any of that. However, they're still marginalized. So if you're to look at how many Nubis are actually in positions, maybe within influential positions in government or anywhere else, it's not that quite many.
Is it fair to say they're marginalized, Hassan, or they just haven't had, because marginalization is deliberate, it's specific. It's like, we are going to make sure these guys don't succeed. There's that versus there are these opportunities we haven't had access to because we're not well educated, or we don't have godfathers in the right places. So I want to sort of, let me use this term that I hate, double click that term on that.
So the pushback I'll give is this: it's both. It's actually both, because for starters, being a Nubi meant you are not Kenyan. So if you're not Kenyan at that time, or you are a second-class Kenyan citizen.
From what perspective? From access to education, or from access to national IDs, or what access?
Let's talk
did
about
Nubis not get?
Access to birth certificates, access to national IDs, access to passports. If you don't have those three, then you have completely constrained that community.
In terms of being able to even get a job.
So how do you get a job? Let's start with that. Where do you get a job from? If you do not have an ID, if an ID is problematic for you to gain. So I would say then it was institutionalized, in my opinion, until now, again, 2010, that you started seeing an element of change. Interestingly, look at this. Do you know we used to have no BMPs in Kibra? So if you were to go back in time, before Leaky, I think Leaky was just before Leaky, there were no BMPs in Kibra. But over time, because of people moving in, and of course, the place, like I said, from my mother's perspective, beautiful. So, I mean, I have some of those old pictures, and I wish I'd be able to share them. Very old pictures of the old Kibra. It was Ushago. It was literally like any other Ushago area. But over time, with the influx of more people coming in, with the influx of urbanization, the trees were the first to go. So trees were chopped down. After that, I mean, the place just changed completely.
Which one did you grow up in?
So I grew up I saw the tail end of the beauty of Kibra as a very young boy.
You said you grew up in which village? Soweto village?
I was born in Soweto village, and we kept on oscillating between Soweto and Olympic Estate.
How many villages in Kibra?
Oh, there are many. I'll get this wrong, but there are many. I can name a few offhand. So there's Kianda, that's what the tail end there. Then there is Soweto. It's called Soweto Ndogo. There's Soweto Ndogo, and then there's Soweto Kubwa. Then there's Gatokera. Then there's Lindi. Then there's Line Sabah. And probably I've left out Mashimoni. There's Mashimoni.
What about
Olympic? Is not considered a village. It was called Sarangombe or Lomle. So when they were moved, and let's go back again to what happened during the First World War, when my great-great-grandmother had to move out of the barracks. So the location they were given is where, I think, Olympic Estate, Ayani Estate, that's the location that they were given. And I still have relatives, especially in Ayani Estate, who still live on the same spot that they were living in 1914, till to date. What happened later on, and this is now what I'm speaking about, marginalization having happened, is that when the government was coming with these housing estates, Priority was not given to the Nubi community who were living there.
And did they have titles?
No, they're not titles. And to that, they still do not have titles. There's just one big mother title of many acre region of land, which is, of course, disputed exactly where the land is. But back then, they had an allotment. So when the estates were being built, it was very simple. We are coming as a government to build, and therefore, what do? Move. So you're taken farther away, more to the edge of the forest. And that's what happened. So when Ayani estate was being built in the 70s, all the Nubis were just removed and reallocated. When Olympic estate was being built, the same thing happened.
And when they were moved out, were they allowed back into these? Were they allocated flats or?
Allocation was based on availability of money. So again, you can allocate me, and then we have no source of income sufficient enough, and that means that they're not allocated a unit. Majority were just moved away, so that we were able to create Olympic, Ayani, Karanja Estate, Fort Jesus. That's basically actually what happened.
So did that then now start to create a difference in Kibra?
Definitely, yes.
Yeah.
So there was the class obviously started there. So there are individuals living in brick and mortar. The rest of you are living in mud houses. Yeah. So again, brings about that element of marginalization, that although your forefathers could have lived there, then for the then government, it was not. I mean, you guys move. There's more space. You go build elsewhere.
Does that mean the majority of Nubis then are entrepreneurs if they're not in formal employment?
True. Kibra is a very interesting community. Do you know you can live all your life in Kibra? And I dare say this, I'm now turning 47 years. You could have lived in Kibra for 47 years without having left Kibra. Yeah, literally, never left Kibra all your life. You could live there and die there.
Because?
Why? Oh, yeah. Oh, because. Sorry, I assumed. Because Kibra has its own economy. It's a very different economy than the one we see. Kibra is almost, I'd say, is self-sustainable. It self-sustains itself. So there's a small Kadogo economy that is there. And if you had Kidogo Pesa, you could survive. And I remember during my time, you didn't have to have much, but it was enough to put a roof over your head, enough probably to have a meal in a day. I mean, you could potentially live in Kibra without having to go elsewhere for employment. And that's, I think, what happened a lot to the Nubi community. And they became entrepreneurs, they opened up businesses. Majority converted the land that you're given into housing. So the aspect of now them being landlords and tenants also popped up. So they said, yeah, we have these big portions of land. So they converted that into tenancy. So a lot of them happened to be the landlords, at least at that time in Kibra. And of course, the businesses around there are also quite many. But that's my memory of Kibra. Yeah.
Your mother meets your father, was a footballer.
Ooh.
Did he play for what, AFC Leopards?
It was called a Baluya Football Club.
Okay, in those days.
So he played in the, can I get this right, in the 60s and 70s. And I mean, he was very good in football.
He had a nickname, Gondrola.
Yeah, he's a Gondrola. Gondrola meaning controller.
Yes,
yeah.
I figured as well.
But you know our guys,
yes.
The C and the G and the P and the B, sometimes, yes. So he was a Gondrola, very good. He was a left center for both the national team and also for Baluya Football Club. And the sport took him everywhere. I mean, I look at his pictures. He was in Ethiopia, in Zambia. He went to Europe to play football. So again, I'm that guy who came at the tail end of my dad having been this heroic figure, so to speak, for the Kenyan community. And by the time I was born, my dad should have been 35 years of age. 35 is right at the tail end of his career. His football career was coming at the end. So I never got to see him play, but we could hear the stories and the pride. And if you ask the older generations, They always talked about him. So I'm also sure if I'm going to get this story right, but I believe my mom was introduced to my dad in a football match somewhere, and I mean, the rest is me, being
Yes,
here.
yes, yeah, of course. So who told you the story? I guess now you're hearing it from your mom.
I'm hearing it from.
But you said your father.
My mom or my dad. That was more from my uncles.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, the ones that you know how these two met. Football match. And
Yes.
it was love at first sight.
Yeah.
And then a few months they were married. Yeah. So that's how they met. And of course, my father's name is Daniel Rocky Esuchi Anyanzo. So if you had to go to his birth certificate, that's the name you find. He has a fifth name, which is Abdulaziz. When he married my mother, obviously, he reverted to Islam.
Yeah.
And his name was Abdulaziz.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one of your ethos when we was doing the pre-meet is prepare to die. And what is your father's early death? How has that led to that being one of the mantras that you live your life by, prepare to die? He died when you were 18
years. Had I turned 18? Yeah, I was 18 years. I was 18 years of age. Around February of 1997.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he was 54 years when he passed away.
That's
I
young.
was 18.
That's young.
I had two younger sisters at 14 and at 10. I was very close to my dad, extremely close. People always said that I was the daddy's boy.
Do you have other brothers?
Yes, I have three older brothers.
Okay.
Much, much older. I think the eldest brother is 10 years older than I am. And then after him, there's one who's 2 years difference, and then another 5 years, then there's me. So I know, and I hear that from my siblings. I say, no, dad kind of spoiled you, used to spoil you. For whatever reason, I don't know. I just know for some, and I know parents love everyone equally, but I know I had a special place. At least I choose to believe so.
Yeah.
Or at least my mother also tells me that. So him dying at an early age was, I mean, it's like something has been ripped off from you. Because as a young boy, and you're just starting to develop into a man, you need, in my opinion, I needed that guidance, that presence, maybe. The word is presence, that there's a manly, fatherly presence. And people might underestimate the need of a fatherly presence. But I think a father is a very important and crucial element into a man's being. And that was then ripped away from me. So you're there, you're 18, you're 19, hormones are going wild, and, everything is happening around you, and this father figure just disappears from you. So, and of course, at that time, you're also having a very hard life. It was not so easy. Like I mentioned, he lost his job. He stopped being a footballer at 35, tried to do some jobs.
Was he able to eke a living out of being a footballer? Are you paid, were footballers paid enough to be able to sustain a family?
Yes.
At that
the answer
time?
is yes. The answer is yes.
Oh.
When you're playing football, the answer is yes. After football, the answer is no. So everything, your earnings end at the day your career ends. So you stop playing football, and then that's the end of it. And that's why you saw, you've heard the stories of other footballers to death, driving around, taxis, doing other things. It's simply because you could not sustain yourself post the wonderful football era.
Yeah.
So, and it's one of the key things my dad had taught me luckily before he died, because all of us were very good footballers. All our family members, my brothers, myself, we loved football. I'm left-footed. I just came to realize it's because my dad also used to play on the left wing. So he discouraged us, specifically me, from playing football. Really discouraged. Then as a young, rebellious
Playing
teenager,
it socially or playing it professionally?
playing football.
Period.
Really discouraged me and said, no, you shouldn't play football. Go read. Anytime he'd find me playing football, he was not particularly amused by it. And I kept on saying, no, you need to be reading. Stop doing this. Just read.
This is so
And then,
interesting.
and of course, it's a conversation that also picked with my mother. And I remember one day I was taken to JJ Masiga, maybe a name you might have
Remember
heard.
Joe Masiga?
Yeah, you remember that? So I was taken to JJ Masiga, and the reason I was taken to JJ Masiga is JJ was a doctor. And I was told, you see what he's doing? He's a doctor, and he's a medical doctor. And here you are playing football. But there he is, a doctor who's playing football. So what we need for me is for you to be a doctor who plays football. So that was a very, and I think as a young man, it was one of the key things that really sunk in at that point. It was like, okay, I sort of get it. I don't get it completely, but I kind of get it. And what I got was that I needed to pursue my education. And my father kept on saying, look at me, I was on top of the world. He had trophies. You'd enter a house, we'd have trophies everywhere. Everywhere there's a trophy. And before his passing away, he gave out all his trophies.
To whom?
Just gave them out, majority. Others, we had to hide them. Because he felt that, he gave all his life to all this, but that's the only thing he had to show, bronze trophies. So he gave them out, gave out all the footballs, gave out all the jerseys. So a lot of the things we had to sort of take and say, giving away. I'm talking about giving away. Just give.
Was he giving it away? Those ones of, I don't have anything more to do with this?
Yes. Yeah. So it was a heavy lesson for us that football at that time was good for you up to the time you're physically fit.
Yeah.
But beyond your physical stamina as a young person or a young man, then what is going to push you to your old age? It wasn't there.
How do you draw that to what you are now? What did that do for getting you out of Kibra, as it were? Because one of the things you said, Hassan, was that 70% of the people you grew up with died, used drugs, are in prison.
Yeah.
How did that get you to the 30%
So
that survived?
The first thing is that it inculcated to me the aspect of reading, that education was important. And my dad, I think, reached class 7. So at that time, that was great. That was big deal. In the 50s and 60s, grade 7 was, wow, umesoma. But as time went by, he could clearly see, even as he was trying to hustle post his football era, getting jobs became more difficult. In the 80s, it was easier to get a job, but as he approached the mid-80s, going to the 90s, it became problematic. So you had younger people who had gone up to the then Form 6.
That's right.
So they're the ones who are getting the jobs, and it gets worse after that. People are starting getting diplomas, certificates, guys getting degrees, and therefore you become sort of redundant. So he inculcated that on me quite a lot and said, you know what, you have to read. You really have to be educated. You need to be better than me. You have to go to university. And I think for me, that was engraved at a very early age, that I needed to be serious around my education. And of course, I was this active young guy with a lot of energy. I was probably the kid that parents would say, mtoto usicheze naye. I was very energetic.
What does that mean, very energetic? I feel like there's something that you're not telling us about that word.
Very opinionated, spoke my mind. That's what my dad used to teach me. My dad would always say, young man, speak your mind. Speak it. I mean, you, but you say, no, don't speak out. Just say it. So I grew up knowing that I was in a safe place that I can speak out my mind. But remember, I'm talking about the 80s, where children were to be seen and not heard.
Yeah.
So then you go outside with that mentality, and then other parents will be like, that child is too much heard, and maybe bad influence for my own kids. So I grew a lot with that as well, that I was I had opinions as a child. I had a sense of right and wrong as a child, and I'd speak up on it. And it's because of a combination of my dad and my mother. Here, my dad insisting that, speak out, go to school, get educated. I want you to be better than me. So that was inculcated in me. And he kept on saying, later on in life, when he saw I truly loved, it's not that I didn't play football. I did play football. I did represent my high school as a football player, as a footballer for the school team. But the point is, at the back of my mind, I always remembered my dad's advice. What if you break a leg? Kept on saying that. What if you break a leg? That's the end of your career. What else do you have to show for it?
So what role did he play in that 30%? Would you then say that he played a big role?
Yes, absolutely.
In getting you to that 30% that survived?
Absolutely. Because he inculcated in me an idea that education was critical.
Yeah.
And education was a game changer. And now when you bring him in and then you bring in my mother as well, that was reinforced. So my mother was there to reinforce the same. And I think when you, I've done the statistic. When I say out of 10, 7 didn't make it. I know those 7. I know them. I can list down to you in a paper and tell you these are my friends. And out of all these friends, this one got stabbed, this one got shot, and this ones were in drugs. I mean, they're there. And majority of that was drugs. Drugs was the big issue. Drugs was, everything was available. I told you, Kibra is a Kadogo economy, the Kibra grew in. So everything was available, from any alcohol you wanted to drink, Toivo, Muratina, Cham, which is Changa, you name it, anything and everything was available. And hard drugs also were available. So I used to call them tap-taps. So, and they were even being sold in schools. So outside schools,
What's a tap-tap?
a tap-tap was a hard drug. I believe it could have been heroin. I don't know what it was. I just know it was a hard drug that you injected. You injected and swallowed as tablets. And they were available. I was lucky enough not to have fallen through that, but many were not. Bangi, the whiff of bang was everywhere. So it was really, and your parents are not always there to, I mean, they're hustling, they're trying. So it's not like you have a nanny seated and they're looking at you like this. You have freedom. In Kibra, you had freedom and you would probably do anything and everything. But when I look back then, I'd say out of every 10 people I know, like I said, 70% never made it. And majority of them died. And they died either because, mostly because they were drug addicts. Alcohol, alcohol was abused everywhere. Back then, there were even those 2 small sachets.
The sachets, yeah.
And the sachets were cheap, they're available. You don't even know what was being made from them. So, like I said, with a few shillings in Kibra, you could survive. You could have a good time, right? Good time if you like alcohol and drugs and everything else. You could eat and you could sleep. So what more do you want as a young person growing up? So I wanted more than that. And I think that's what my parents were trying to inculcate in me at a very early age. The issue of violence was also quite a lot. So a lot of stabbing, a lot of shooting for those who went into crime, because I do have friends who did go into crime. They never made it. So yes, they came, flashy money, short period of time, they're dead, they're gone. So you learn from that. You always taught you should learn from the example of others before it happens to you. But I also think, in my opinion, if I was to think through, I think I had a good head on my shoulders. That regardless of everything else, Mira, let's not forget Mira. Gomba was everywhere, available, and in any grade that you want. So I was lucky, and I'd be very honest and candid with you. I tried most of those things. It's not that I didn't. I'll not say I was an angel, and I was.
You're a young guy.
I wasn't an angel. I did, but for some weird reason, everything rejected. My body rejected. Mira rejected. I tried to eat that, and my lips would really cut through, and I'd really get swollen.
Yeah.
My gums would actually bleed, and I was like, I mean, what is this tare, you guys?
Yes.
I don't get it.
Yeah.
You know. So everything that I did try as a young teenager, I didn't go through with it.
So were you lucky, Hassan? Because we're going to talk about the part
The
of
element
luck.
of luck?
Yeah, let's talk about luck. Yes, your parents set a standard, but clearly if these things had gone with your body, if your body had accepted them, would we be talking about a different story altogether?
Probably. But it's more than just the body. The body is a percentile of that. But there's another one knowing it was wrong. This is not right. So it's not right for you. A, you're a Muslim, shouldn't be doing this. B, is not good for you. C, I was always scared of my mom until today.
There we go.
Scared of my mom.
Your father dies at 18, but you get somebody else to mentor you, completely unplanned for. And you said his name is Ben Muchemi.
Oh, Ben Muchemi. Ben Muchemi was the closest thing I had to a father figure. Of course, there was a gap between the time my dad died at 18 and the time I met Ben. I believe I met Ben, wow, I'm trying to, maybe 7, 8 years later. I met
What were
Ben.
you doing by this time?
Oh, by that time, I was a lucky guy. And you know, you've mentioned something about coming out of Kibra. There's a lot of luck in it. Luck. I also say, I keep on, in my head, I keep on saying my father guided me. He's never been here, but I always feel there's like a presence around him. I feel God was kind to me. Because in Kibra, number one, I went through Olympic Primary School. It's a public school, one of the best schools that there was at that time. Very crowded, but we learned. Got good grades, very good grades.
Just say them. I can see
I
you
was
want to
an
sema
A.
ikutoke.
I was an A
Sema
student.
ikutoke.
I was an A student. Straight A's. So,
Coming out of Olympic.
yeah, coming from Kibra in Olympic, you get.
Yeah.
And then from
Is
there.
it that they had good teachers or what?
No, tuko tunachapwa vizuri.
Proper. By who? The teachers or the
teachers,
parents?
yes.
Okay.
This thing of kids are being canned right now, I mean, we need to discuss that later on, but the reality is that we were canned. Of course, it was extreme, I'll be honest. It was an extreme
What do you mean
caning.
you were caned to get good results?
Education had to be infused in you. You were not taught.
By force, by fire?
Yes, it had to get inside you. You had to accept the education. It was through a can. So Olympic of those days was a lot of caning. Any person who's from Olympic Primary will tell you they went through quite a lot of caning. So there's a lot of caning for not knowing answers, a lot of caning for not getting good
So you're
grades.
saying that education was beaten to you? They
Yeah,
beat
it was
the
a bit.
out of you?
It was beaten to me. And of course, it's not something I'd wish probably other people to go through. And I don't think it's the right way of educating. But it worked for me in a way. So yes, it was beaten to us. Then we went into high school. And then high school was a bit different. There was no beating. Of course, there was caning, but there was no beating. Because caning was now
There was caning,
was
but
more
there's no
structured.
beating.
Yes.
Just listen to yourself,
Yeah,
Hassan, over
no,
there.
No.
Caning is beating.
No, it isn't. There's a difference.
What are you talking about?
In Nairobi school, you're not beaten. You are canned. You are canned for having done something wrong. And then we have
Nairobi school patch.
Patch, a Pacherian. A very proud Pacherian. Clearly. So we had different levels of cans, and only the deputy head teacher could can you. So it was not everyone who, in Olympic, everybody would can you. Every teacher would can you. They'd call other teachers to can you. That's why I'm saying it was more of a beating, in my opinion. But in high school, it was more structured. There were mistakes.
I can't believe we're talking about structured beating.
Yes.
There's something so wrong in this conversation.
No,
like
hold
our
on.
beating was more structured.
No,
Because
hold
it was
on.
done at a higher level. Listen to yourself, Hassan.
Carol, chill, Carol.
I'm very chilled. I'm cane chilled.
There was punishment. And there was punishment that you would go cut the grass. There was punishment that you will kneel down. There was punishment that you will do frog jumps or whatever it was. There was all of that. But there was a punishment that it reached a level that you would be canned. And that would have been, probably you caught smoking. Probably you beat somebody else. You're in a fight. Probably you skived through the fence. You're in illegal drugs, whatever it is. So we knew there were rules. There were very clear rules that this is the threshold that finally you go to the deputy head teacher. And it was counted. We knew it was 3 cans for this, 2 for that, 1 for that. Maximum, I think, was 5. So we knew that. And compared to Olympic, that for me was heaven. It was clearly heaven.
Well, I guess because in high school, you had to commit a felony or a crime for you to get caned.
Yes.
But what I'm hearing is that in
primary school, you'd
it
be
was-
canned for somebody else's mistake.
Oh.
So somebody had messed up, and the whole class would be canned.
So they beat the success into
me.
you.
Yes, they did. But then again, ask yourself, there are the success was never beaten into them. So again, could there have been other factors beyond being beaten so that you accept an education? And
so this A of Olympic ni A ya kuchapwa.
Nilichapwa.
That's what you're saying.
Yeah, nilichapwa. Lakini wengine walichapwa kupata A. So haiwezi kuwa ni Kenya. Haikuwa kuchapwa peke yake. There could have been other factors that also played.
So let's go back to Ben.
So I'm coming to Ben. So by the time I was leaving Olympic, Patch, I spent about 2 years with my mom. Of course, my dad died. It took me like 1.5 years of grieving, not knowing what I wanted to do with my life, very confused character. I was lost completely. And then, of course, my mother had formed the Kenya Anti-Rape Organization, which I went into it and I tried to assist for some few times before.
Kenya
luckily,
Anti-Rape Organization.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. You want me to speak into that?
No, we'll talk about it. Let's finish with Ben.
So from there, I managed to go to campus, the University of Nairobi. Did I say
is
the?
Is there a reason why you use the?
Yeah. Did I say the?
We call it Campo.
Yeah. No. It was the University of Nairobi. Right. That's the university I went to.
You just say what Kenyans like to say. I saw my dad. I cleared. First of all, Kenyans have to say, I cleared Patch or I cleared high school. I'm like, high school is not a bush to be cleared. You finished high school and then you went to the university.
Thank you.
What were you studying there?
Economics.
Okay.
So I did my economics.
So you were in Maine?
Yeah, I was in Maine campus. So I did my economics. Of course, I was hustling, trying to get in. It wasn't easy as well. It's a public university, but they were not giving you full bursary. So it meant you half work and half learn.
Where were you working?
Everywhere. I started doing, I was selling stuff. So I was a hawker of some sort, selling everything and anything. But the most interesting one, the university gave me space whereby I opened an aerobics training for other students. And wow, I mean, I always appreciate the university for that. I really do. They gave me a room for free with no charge. It was in box where the ladies were, so upstairs.
Hassan, you know I'm judging
Carol,
you. Was this about exercise or was this a place for your pals to come and get chicks?
Okay. Majority of the trainees were actually ladies, obviously, as always. Yeah. So I did aerobics, and I used to do aerobics classes at 5 in the morning, and also at 7 to 8 in the evening, and that was good income for me. It was very good income. So amongst all that hustling, I managed to get out of campus, and I got my first few jobs, hustling here, selling insurance. Then somehow I stumbled upon the Safaricom dealers network as an accountant. But then I was doing my CPAs and my CPS, which by the way I did through Strathmore Distance Learning School back then. And within a span of about 2 years or so, I was engaging with Ben. And Ben Muchemi was the first Safaricom dealer in Kenya. He's the first person who opened a Safaricom shop in Kenya, number one. So Ben was very passionate about the dealership network. By then, we only had about 20 dealership companies that were doing 97% of Safaricom business.
So these are the guys who made good money from the beginning.
Yeah, they did. They actually did. And from my interactions, he could see something in me because I was being sent there to represent these dealership companies. I moved from one. I joined one that had 4. Very soon I was running 14 dealership companies. 14.
These are retail outlets?
The retail outlets. Okay. But in terms of companies, because
this is
they
the
were
time
individual companies.
Say that again. So one distributor has 14 different companies.
Yes.
And they were doing this because...
I mean, they had the money to actually do it.
Okay.
So I got lucky enough to be there, go inside there. I was a hardworking dude. So in terms of being an accountant, went to become a finance manager, quickly put me into a GM. It was very fast, my rise, but it was because of the work that I'd put inside. And then, of course, Ben saw me, and we were engaging with Ben. And Ben was saying, you know what, we need to come up with an association for dealers. We needed a way whereby we could face Safaricom. Safaricom is a big entity, and here you are, smaller players but also disjointed. So it was their way for us to come together and form an association. So from there, he managed to front my name to become the CEO and Secretary General for the Safaricom Dealers Association. He didn't know me, he knew me by the fact that we related very well. And we became good friends. He was much older, so I treated him like I treat my own dad, for a lot of wisdom, a lot of parting of knowledge. But his story is also remarkable because his story is also a bit sad because he also diagnosed with cancer, which he didn't know. For many years, he had been going to hospital and being treated. From what he told me, it was more of ulcers and and the medication he was being given was just to sort of manage that. Until one day he had to get a second opinion, and they discovered he had cancer, stomach cancer. And when they discovered he had stomach cancer, he was told, this is terminal and you're not going to live. And immediately they took him to India for surgery, and they gave him a 6% chance of surviving the surgery.
6% chance of surviving the surgery.
But he said, as long as there's hope, let me do it. After all, you're telling me it's terminal and I'm dying. So if it's terminal and I'm dying, but there's a 6% chance, then why don't we give it a shot? And they went ahead, did the surgery, removed 90% of his stomach, 90%. So he remained with a very tiny stomach. I remember when you sit with him, he'd just take a sip here, just a small piece of food there. And when he came back, he was told, you now have 3 months to live. So you've done this surgery for you, and you prepare your affairs, and there's nothing much you can do than manage. And he says, I remember talking to him, whereby he said that he sat there in his hospital bed, wondering, he's going to die. So he did all his affairs, put everything, notified everyone. And as the first month passed away, he realized, what, after all, I only have like less than 2 months to live. But he was a rally driver. It's the one thing he loved more than anything else. And he said, what, but then I'm going to die. Why am I going to die here? I can die doing what I love best. So he checked himself out of hospital against all advice and went back into rallying. So he did marvelous things. I remember he did the first media rally. It was him who introduced that. By the time he was passing away, he was the chairman of the Kenya Motorsports. And he went back into rallying. And his story is remarkable. He is a guy who has been given 3 months to live, back on the rally. And remember,
rallying is a very high energy.
And leave alone the rallying, Carol, you speak about right now. It's not this rally you're saying. This was 600 kilometers of gruesome rally. And he'd participate in that. And he was sick, always back in hospital, puking, and, being told by the doctor, why are you doing this? You're killing yourself. You shouldn't do this.
You're killing yourself.
And he
it's
said,
like I've got 3 months to live.
3 months to live. So imagine this. He lived for another 5 years, doing what he loved best. 5 more years God gave him. And he said during those 5 years' time is when he realized that he had to give more. So he was a giving person. He gave a lot. He opened a rally school, tried to get people to understand rallying, helped anyone and everyone. If you're in need of anything, Ben Muchemi was the guy that you'd go to. So he became a father figure for me. He became somebody who guided me. I was this young, like I said, a very highly opinionated, energetic dude who, I came from Kibra, and he elevated me to a boardroom with Michael Joseph, with Bob Collimo. These are the people I sat with, being in the lobby group of Safaricom Dealers Association. And of course, exposed me to those interactions. I have good interactions, I remember. I remember Michael one day telling me, I've never forgotten, I still carry it today. Ben had asked me to draft a lobbying paper to Safaricom on behalf, obviously, of the board. And I went ahead, drafted. It was like 6 or 7 pages. And we took it to Michael Joseph.
Who was the CEO of Safaricom at the time.
Yes.
Okay.
So in the boardroom, you're sitting there. So Michael flips through. And, his color used to change when he was not very happy. So he flipped through, and he finally puts it down, looks at us for about 2 minutes and says, out of everyone in this room, I know this was drafted by you. And he pointed at me. And there I am, obviously, wow, okay, I'm getting the wrath. And we had written many accusations there, including, your staff this, your staff that, your managers this, your managers that. And then, of course, our issues. So he was pretty much pissed off. And he said, you know what? I appreciate what you've written here, but I want to guide you that you should never, ever, ever write anything to me that is beyond 1 page. Because it means beyond a page, you're losing your argument. You're going into sideshows. So if you're coming to advocate or to lobby, 1 page, everything you have, you could just have done it in 1 page. But here you've gone, then you've brought other issues that were not there. So moving forward, if you ever want me to either respond or to see you, it has to be a 1-pager. Do you know until today I do 1-pager letters? Until today. Anything I lobby, I write, I just remember that discussion, I remember his face, and I go like, I'm not going to piss him again. So that is the kind of exposure Ben gave to me, an exposure to a corporate world. I'm very much appreciative of a gentleman who did not know me. I was not related to him. I was not from his tribe. I was never introduced to him.
Why would you bring in tribe?
No, I just want to bring it out that in Kenya we have this thing that watu wangu, watu wetu, it's either my tribe, my religion, something like that. The guy did not see that in me. He just saw a person who was able to do something. Yeah. And he believed in me enough, and he made me believe in myself. So it's something that you're not taught. It's something that you're shown. And I think Ben actually showed it to me.
You've got a lot of strong people in your lives. That's what I've heard, Hassan. Your father, the footballer, Ben, the rally car driver, and your mom, the founder of Kenya Anti-Rape Organization.
Yes.
Could you talk to us a little bit about that and the role that she played in taking care of sexual assault and gender-based violence for both genders, not just for females?
Yeah. So my mother, Fatma Abeida Nyanzo, I say that with a lot of pride. She formed amongst the very first NGOs in Kenya. So the Kenya Anti-Rape Organization was an NGO, one of its kind. I should say this, my mother chose that name because she felt that rape was a discussion that was never discussed, and it was happening all around us.
So rape was a topic that was never discussed.
It was never discussed.
Okay.
Yeah, rape was a topic that was never discussed. We could see it, we could hear it, we could see the victims around it, but the victims were being treated as if they were even guilty. So she felt that she had a duty of doing something. And this comes from, it's good to go 2 steps back and say my mother from a very early age was she used to advocate for the way of life she had seen when she was brought up. The Kibra, the beautiful Kibra that was there before Kibra now converted to where it is right now. And one of the key things she really fought for, even before she formed this organization, where there is, it's called the Southern Bypass. The Southern Bypass, opposite Kibra, there is Nairobi Women's. Nairobi Women's used to come all
Nairobi
the
Women's
way.
Prison, hospital?
Nairobi Women's Prison.
Okay.
So Nairobi Women's Prison used to come all the way to Kibra. So there was Nairobi Women's, a cliff, leave alone where the bypass is. The bypass never existed. There was no road there. So there was Nairobi Women's, up to the cliff, and then on one side there was Ngong Forest. And then from there was Kibra. So a dumping site was created by the then Nairobi city. So they created a very big dumping site there. I remember my initial memories as a child was seeing those big, they're called marabou stocks, very huge ones. They used to be everywhere around, and they used to go to the dumping site. And she was very instrumental in getting that dumping site moved together with the other activists. And she kept on saying, this is not safe for us, it's bad, our water is being contaminated, it's bad for our breathing and all that. And at a very early stage, I could see my mother, the firebrand in her, advocating for beyond her own house. Despite the issues we were having, she had this desire of something better, not just for her, but for everyone else. Yeah. So as time went by, And the issues of, again, gender-based violence are on the rise. The community is becoming more, more people were streaming in. It was becoming more urbanized. You're moving from a rural area. People are not knowing one another. The issue of violence against women was very high back in the 80s. And she came out very strongly and formed the Kenya Anti-Rape Organization. So her role was to create awareness around rape, to remove the stigma of rape. It's not just rape, it was also men. Some men were being sodomized. Other men were victims of gender-based violence inside the marriage. So men were being beaten in marriage.
But were they willing to talk about it then?
Of course not.
Yeah.
And that's what she was trying to bring out.
Yeah.
She wanted to create an NGO that would be able initially to talk about women's right and children's right. But quickly she could see those women, children, boy, girl, men. So it became an NGO for all of that. And one of the most saddest moments I recall until today, and I was a pretty young guy, probably I was 13 years, was St. Kizito. If you Google that, you can be able to see what happened was something amongst the darkest time in the history of Kenya, whereby 72 children in St. Kizito, it was a high school, a mixed boys and girls high school in Meru, whereby 72 girls were raped and 19 were killed as that was happening. So I remember that vividly because it was something my mother, it broke her completely. And she was in the forefront of creating that awareness and saying, this is wrong. And you should have seen media back there, media almost accusing the girls of being the ones who are on the wrong, which is not right. So my mother could see that there was a gap between accusation, having those complaints taken to the police, and having even a legal framework of having some legal solutions being provided to the rape victims. So she came up with that, and after a while, I think she got some funding from FIDA and Ford Foundation, if I do recall. It's a very short funding, 2 years or so. But she says she managed to create the awareness. And some of the leading lawyers in this country, including leading judges, did pass through her as interns. And the remarkable thing was that this NGO was purely voluntary. So she was not paid for it. She was volunteering her service, her time, her house. She could house those victims of violence in her house. And they'd stay with us for a period of 1 week, 2 weeks, before she could be able to get somewhere where they're able to go, or even go to the police stations to make sure that they were able to report. Nobody wanted to report. Evidence was being destroyed. So she came up with a way whereby you could be able to maintain the evidence, make sure there's a case, make sure that the whole due process is followed so that the victims were able to get justice.
But this was ahead of her time, especially around the violence against men,
yes.
whether it's sexual assault or marital assault.
True, and it was not also taken kindly by the government of the day. She was arrested multiple times.
On what basis?
Provoking public disorder, those, a lot of that. It was more of the state felt that she was doing something she did not need to do. And she was creating a lot of disturbance and making a lot of noise. So when I look back, I have pictures of my mother, in jail, in prison rather, being locked up. And of course, the likes of the late Professor Wangari coming out to try and get her out. So it was pretty much interesting to see a mother who was willing to give it all for the community. So that's where I came from. And now back to your question, and sorry, I've taken a long time. I needed to set the context for it, is that my mother believed very strongly that real men don't hit women. Simple as that. And as boys, that's what she taught us. She taught everyone that. As a man, you don't ever, under any circumstance, hit a woman. There's no justification for it. Absolutely none. I'd love to say I've never hit a woman. So I think I've learned from my mother. But it's something inculcated in us that as men, we do have a role to also protect our women. And I think that's what my mother was teaching from a very early and tender age, that you're a man. Your job, you see your sisters here, protect them. You get a wife, protect them. You have a daughter, protect them. You have parents, protect them. That means you have a neighbor, protect her.
Yeah.
You have, a community, protect the women. So something that was highly inculcated on us.
Is her NGO still?
No, it's a defunct NGO.
It's defunct now? She's retired?
She's retired, but she still offers anyone advice, anyone who wants to speak to her. And she says this, her role was to create awareness.
Yeah.
The younger women, the younger men have run with that. She's happy when she sees in the Supreme Court and she sees in the High Court, there are women who are up there. She's very happy around that. She looks at advocates and says, wow, look at that. Now we have advocates who are women. And then the issue of rights, both for women and children, is highly, it's inculcated in us right now. According to her, her work was done. She did her job. Her job was to create awareness, and the Kenya Anti-Rape Organization was actually meant to do that.
So many really strong mentors. How has that impacted you today as a leader? You're CEO of Stima Sacco, which is what? Third largest Sacco in Kenya?
Second largest Sacco in Africa. Let's correct that.
My bad, I'm sorry. In Africa. And we've watched it evolve, Hassan, under your leadership into being, a real model. Soon to be a large financial institution, because that's the next step, is to convert into a bank at the rate you're headed. What has been the common thread, would you say, based on from your childhood to this point, to driving your leadership ethos? Difficult childhood, but you punched above your weight, punched through a beating, or you were punched, beaten into submission and success, into Patch, from Patch into University of Nairobi, to all that you've come up in. Now you're at the helm of, as you say, the second largest Sacco in Africa.
In Africa. So let's first correct something behind. Stima Sacco is a cooperative, and we have 7 lovely cooperative principles we believe in. Nothing the banks do believe in. If I can mention 1 or 2, the first one is that we only serve members, so we are owned by members, so we don't serve customers. We are democratically controlled, meaning our members can be able to democratically elect who they want to run the institution. So in terms of the board, in terms of the delegates, they're also able to do that. And many others that probably in another time I can be able to discuss them. So Stima has no desire to become a bank. Absolutely none. Today our core capital is 13 billion Kenya shillings. I know the banks are struggling with some banks with 5B, and they're being told to go to 10B. And if I do recall, they went to Parliament to get some time, maybe 5 years time span, to reach that core capital. So we already hit that core capital, and we did that about 3-4 years ago. We do believe that the model of a cooperative is a model that works as is, that you don't need to convert to a bank, that in more developed nations, if you go to Canada and you go to the US, the largest credit union, that's what they call SACCOs there, the largest one in the world is called the Navy Federal Credit Union. It has an asset base of, wait for it, 26 trillion Kenya shillings. 26 trillion.
Wow.
That's a SACCO in the US. Another one in Canada, the one that we like benchmarking with, is called Van City, has an asset base of about 7 trillion Kenya shillings. Of course, you can check what our GDP and our budget is, and that can tell you quite a lot. So when you look up to those, then we believe that Stima Sacco at 68 billion right now could potentially be a 1 trillion Sacco with the model that we do have, because our model is all about being at the bottom of the pyramid. And the reason I am sitting in the role that I am sitting in, and I take a lot from having come from Kibra. Kibra, we were mostly unbanked. There's no bank would have touched anything that you're doing. The businesses that are being run there, there's none that was going to do it. But a cooperative can. And therefore, when I look back at my journey and I look at where I am, I feel like I'm in the right place, because it's giving me a platform whereby I can potentially do more than even my mother could. I always remember that now I have a platform. It's a huge platform. It's a bigger platform potentially than what she had. Look at what she did with a smaller platform. So then if I have a role as a CEO, then my question is, and I look back at the experiences of Ben Muchemi, I look at my dad, I look at my mother, and I look at the great things they did with the smaller platform they had. then I am challenged every other day to do much more. So 2 answers there. No, never converting to a bank, because the model works. The cooperative model is about those like the people in Kibra, right there at the bottom of the pyramid, who are aspiring to be me today. That's the model that can actually take them up there. So in my leadership, then I borrow very heavily from my past experiences. So it means, number one, generally, I'd say generally, I don't know, there's always how you look at yourself in a mirror, and there's what people tell you about. Generally, I believe I'm a kind-hearted person. I have a good soul and a good head on my shoulder. And a lot of it came from the experiences I had growing up. It also came from these very strong pillars, the 3 stools, the pillars, my mother, Ben Muchemi, my dad, and some others here and there. These are the people who sort of guided the trajectory to where I am today. So I hear people say, no, and I used to say that before, I'm a self-made man. I used to say that. But in hindsight, when I look at it, there's nothing self-made about me. A lot of it is somebody willing to give you a helping hand and saying, you know what, you've stumbled. Can I hold your hand and lift you up? You know, you're tired. Why don't you rest a bit? Can I pick this up for you? So that's what happened to me. And I look at across all those journeys. And I have many people in my life, including in high school, in that primary school as well, teachers who were so kind and good to me and were able to model me to who I am. But it was all about them being kind-hearted and wanting to do more in the platform, in the sphere of influence that they had. So when I look therefore at my leadership, I always remember that. And I say, oh, dude, hold on. Let it not get into your head. It could be anything today. I could be the chokora on the road. I could be the person who's sleeping on the roadside. I could have been the robber. That's a possibility. I could have been the drunkard.
Yeah.
I could have been all of that. But somehow, the path that was created by people who surrounded me, the people who influenced me, and again, having a good head on your shoulder, has managed me to sit in a boardroom. And I remember the first interview I ever went for. I was so excited. You know, I never got the job, but I was so excited. I was like, I'm sitting in a boardroom, I'm being asked questions by the interviewer, but I'm thinking probably that's why I failed the interview, but I was so excited of being in a boardroom.
Which boardroom was this?
I can't remember. It was one, I can't remember the company. One
And
of
this
the
was,
bigger international companies. I was called for an interview.
And what was the role you were being interviewed for?
Oh, it was a managerial role at
Yeah.
that time. And I was so excited for me.
Yeah.
Have you ever been so happy for you that you even forget questions? So, but I always recall that and I say, you know, I had an opportunity that many other people did not have. And therefore, I infused that into my leadership. And I am most likely to be the most forgiving CEO that you'll get. Most likely, I don't know, according to me. The most understanding, I try to be. But also the one that would create an environment for other people to rise up. I truly believe in that somebody gave me a baton and said, Ben gave me something that, I don't know, I always appreciate that. He gave me an opportunity. So I'm a believer in giving opportunities to other people.
Passing the baton backwards.
And that's my greatest challenge in life. Am I doing enough? Am I living up to these very great people who did all of those things? And it's a question I always ask myself over and over and over. And sometimes I beat myself up, not physically, but I beat myself up because I think that I could do more. That am I doing more? There's that question that you're always asking yourself. So my leadership style is pretty much influenced by where I come. I look around me and I look at people who have no opportunity. If you have no opportunity, I will most likely give you an equal, not a favorable opportunity, but I'll give you an equal opportunity if I can. Internships, if you're looking for a job, any of that, I will make sure that you're given an opportunity so that you can try it out. That's what has defined the leadership. And moving forward is then to ask myself, the platform I've been given today, now it's not just about the Nubian community. It's not about where my father comes from. I'm speaking about so many other people, so many other Kenyans who believe in this institution and they look up to me. So can I try and be the Ben Muchemi for them? Can I be the Dan Anyanzo, the Fatma Anyanzo for them? These are the kind of questions that I have. Could people look up to me and say, you know what? This guy, you gave him an opportunity and he's done his best and he's assisted me in any way. My last point is the thing that when I go home, when I put my head on a pillow to sleep, I always ask myself, did I do the best of everything today? If I could redo this, rewind, would I change anything?
Would you?
Yes. In some instances, yes.
Yeah.
Obviously, yeah. Of course, in hindsight is 2020. But with that information there, I tend to think I try and do my best with what I have. I'm not perfect. I'm the most perfectly imperfect human that you'd find outside there. But I believe it's a continuous improvement and that every day is a learning. Every day I'm outside there learning from somebody.
And Gondola would be happy?
I hope he is happy. I hope so. I truly hope so. I talk to him a lot, by the way, through prayers. I pray every day and he's always in my prayer. And I've taught my kids to pray for him as well. So I kind of love when I hear my children talk to my father through prayer. When you do a dua after our prayers, they always put him and they always say, you know, please take care of dads, and they say something nice wherever he is. And interestingly, remember I was told not to play football, right?
Well, you delivered.
Yeah, I delivered. However, and of course he told me to be a doctor. I became a doctor. Not the kind of doctor you wanted.
Yes, a doctor of PhD.
Yeah, I got
like
a PhD,
that. Yeah.
so I'm hope he's happy with that.
Absolutely.
But interestingly, my son loves football a lot.
But it's just a different time.
Yeah, it's a different life. He loves, and I encouraged him, and he really loves. We always have this argument between Messi. He keeps on saying Ronaldo has more skill than Messi, and I'm a Messi boy. So it's a very nice argument you can find us doing. So of late, because he's much older, he looks at the picture of the grandfather and goes like, wow, Dad, your father has more skills than Messi and Ronaldo. And I go like, definitely.
Well, thank you so much, Hassan. This has been a fascinating story through the history of Kibra, as you heard from some of the people behind the scenes. They didn't even know, that the Nubi were a community, or that they did know the Nubi were a community, but didn't know the history. And the pain and the marginalization, and how you can have people float to the top and get to the top of corporate Kenya. So absolutely well done for that. As we come towards the tail end, we do something called Nitpicks on the quick. We haven't told you about it because we didn't want you to prepare. You claim, please note the word claim, to have been an A student, even though you have also admitted that you were beaten into your A. Let's just figure out how it goes. So we're going to ask you a series of questions. We call it Nitpicks on the quick.
All right.
Say the first answer that comes to mind.
The first
Don't
that
overthink
comes.
it.
Don't overthink it.
Yeah.
Okay.
First question. Early riser or sleep in over the weekends?
I'm not an early riser. I'm a night owl. I'd wake up to 1 or 2 in the morning. Yeah? I hate waking up in the morning. Okay. I only do it because my job dictates that I need to wake up early. But I could wake up to 10, 12, 1, 2. Wow. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Now, give me one answer.
Oh, one answer.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you said you were number one?
No, I didn't say I was number one.
You said you...
No, I said I got an A.
Okay.
There's a difference.
Okay, that's all this. So now one answer. Text or phone call?
Text.
Cooking a meal or ordering takeout?
Cooking.
What do you cook?
I cook everything. On Sunday, I cook for my family.
What did you cook?
I cook anything and everything. I cook a proper meal. If you want
chapati, I've asked you like
rice,
3 times and you still haven't gotten to it.
I cook chapati. I can cook rice. Ugali goes without say. Stew.
So chapati, you will make it from scratch?
Yes, I cook pilau. Anything that you require. In fact, on Sunday morning, no one cooks. They expect me in the kitchen. Breakfast and lunch. Wow. The bare minimum. Wow. That's an expectation. If I don't wake up, then no one eats breakfast. I find those guys sitting there and waiting.
Just waiting.
Just waiting for me. Yeah.
This is brilliant.
Yeah. So cooking.
Mountains or the beach?
Mountains.
Travel back in time or fast forward your life?
Fast forward my life. Fast forward. You want me? I'm looking at that from a picture of going into the future and seeing what the future is there. I'd love to. I'd love to go. Yeah. And then come back if you have that option. Not stay.
Choose.
Then traveling back in time. Definitely. I'd spend more time with my dad.
I thought that's exactly what you were going to say. These conversations you'd like to have with him
that I
based
never
on
got.
that you never got to.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love for him to see, for example, like anytime I drive on the road, I go like, my dad never saw Thika Road or never saw Expressway. What did he think of the new Ngong Road? What did he think of a smartphone? You know, those kind of conversations would be kind of interesting. I wish I could go back and tell him, you know, in 20 years' time, all of this is going to happen. Yeah.
Favorite Kenyan dish?
Ugali.
What do you syndicate it with?
Goes without saying. Ugali with mrenda and beef. Oh, no, change. Scrap that. Ugali, mrenda, and chicken. I'm a chicken guy.
Oh God, this is not the Nubian.
I can eat chicken every single day. For lunch, breakfast, and...
Kenyaji or...
Kenyaji preferred.
Preferred
Kenyaji.
What's the one thing you always carry with you?
My phone.
You didn't even have to think twice. You just said that, yeah?
It's my phone. I mean, right now it's only my phone. You meant a physical item?
Yeah, anything. It could even be your thoughts, but you defaulted straight into your phone. And that's fine. Okay. What's your go-to stress reliever?
Gym. I work out a lot. Yeah. I like saying that I convert all the toxicity I get into abs, six-pack. Not saying I have a six-pack. Maybe it's an 8-pack.
Or it's a no-pack. Right? It could be anything. What's the most inspiring place you visited?
Oh, Mount Kilimanjaro.
Did you climb?
Yes, to the third peak, Uhuru Peak.
And you summited
Took
Uhuru
me
Peak.
5 days. 5 days to summit, 2 days to come down. I lost 3 toenails. Yeah, that's what I remember. 3 toenails went.
Ouch. So you had the wrong shoes.
I spent... Coming down was a problem. Going up is, of course, hard, but coming down was quick and very fast. Yeah. And I think my shoes were... I had space. I had space on the shoe. Yeah. So that's how I got...
Ouch. Don't say it again, because I'm already feeling...
Yeah.
Read the book or watch the movie?
I read the book.
What's the last book you read?
I've been rereading a book over and over. It's by Stephen Covey. It's The 7 Habits of Success.
Highly effective people or something.
That book. You should see the book. It's old and it's in tatters. Then I've taken, what do you call those, sticky notes? From page 1 to the last. That's what I'm reading.
Do you live by those principles?
Yes, I do.
Okay, which is the most effective habit you have?
Execution.
Okay.
Yeah.
You've been a great pleasure to have, Hassan.
Asante.
I've learned something new about you today.
Really?
That you are a Pacharian. And you are an Olympic primarian.
Yes.
And you are a University of Nairobi alumni. The university, kill me now. Yes. The University of Nairobi.
Yep.
Thank you, Hassan. You've been a great guest.
Asante sana.
Today we walked through a story of contrasts. A boy from Kibra learning self-belief from a mother who refused for her son to be defined by circumstance. A father whose voice, though silenced too soon, taught him to always speak his mind. A heritage of warriors and quiet heroes passed down not through textbooks, but through lived history. And a stranger named Ben Muchemi who showed up with no reason to help except for one, because he could. Dr. Hassan reminds us that none of us are truly self-made. We are lifted by those who see potential in us before we see it in ourselves. And that's where we will leave you. Take a moment to think, how can you be the Ben for someone today?